Good evening, and thank you very much, Father, for having me here this evening. And thank you, Pierre, for your initiative. This was Pierre's idea to speak on Fatima. We originally thought we'll do this on the 17th of March. I've said, can you put it back a week to the 24th of March? When we made that decision, we had no idea that we were going to get an announcement from Pope Francis that he intended to consecrate Russia and the Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. So in my mind, it's at least a tiny divine coincidence that this event is happening here before the main event, Saturday morning our time. I just want to let you know that this is a very, very long talk. For your own knowledge, I don't expect to finish before 10 p.m. You're free to leave at any time if that's too late for you, but you'll miss my opinion on the current consecration prayer, whether it fulfills Our Lady's requests or not. I'm going to say many things tonight at my own risk, and say things politically, religiously, socially that some of you will not agree with. And so I preface everything I say by making it very clear it's my private opinion often, and of course you're free to disagree, etc., etc. If we've got time for questions, I'm certainly happy to take any questions from the floor. My first knowledge about Fatima was about 1980. I had a friend of mine named Les who introduced me to the message of Our Lady of Fatima, but then I was rather cautious about anything Marian because I was semi-Protestant at the time. It would be quite a few more years before I would be comfortable with things Marian. I also should mention I'm going to limit my own commentary and stick to the text as much as possible, just reading it because of the length of this presentation. Then I became a real firm believer in the message of Our Lady of Fatima from the middle of the 80s onwards. After May 2000, when the Vatican released the third secret of Fatima, I looked at it and I said, oh, is that it? Oh, okay. And then I basically put it behind me in the background. I just fell into the line that it's fulfilled and there's nothing else to be concerned about. I still had a devotion to Our Lady of Fatima and the Immaculate Heart, but I basically thought, well, it's run and done, and that was the official line coming from the Vatican. My interest was renewed in 2014. Aware of what's happening in the church and the direction within the church, I became much more concerned about the state of the church and then the state of the world. And when we had the first Ukrainian crisis in 2014, 2015, I began to think about Fatima again and the need for a solution to the state of the world and the crisis in the church, and I began to think about the consecration of Fatima again. I was visiting my mother on a Sunday, and my older brother John, who's here tonight, I don't want to embarrass him, but he suggested to me about a book called The Fourth Secret of Fatima by Antonio Socci. When my brother mentioned it, I thought, well, that's cute, okay, it's probably one of those conspiracy theory type of books, that's nice enough. And I didn't really say to myself, I need to read that book. Things changed when I heard about this book by Robert Haddad, The Consecration of Russia. And I read this book and I rechanged my mind about Fatima. I realized there were a lot of questions still unanswered and some serious problems we need to confront. Then I went ahead and I read Antonio Socci's book, and I found it interesting, not as impactful as Robertson Genesis' book, but still very, very interesting. This was a man who had first believed that the third secret of Fatima had been fully revealed, and then encountered the traditionalist arguments that the third secret was not fully revealed, and researched in order to counter the traditionalist arguments, and came to realize, hold on, there is a problem. Then I went ahead and I read this book, The Secret by Christopher Ferrara, and I found that this was the most forensic, the most precise, and probably the best book on the question of the third secret. In 2017 was the 100th anniversary of the first apparitions of Our Lady, so people were expecting something to happen. I did that talk that Pierre mentioned at St. Joseph's, Croydon. I was expecting something to happen. Nothing big happened as such. Anyway, that's just a bit of background. What happened at Fatima? Well, it's a public prophecy. The historical context is the First World War. And actually before 1917, 1916, between the great battles of Verdun, which began in February 1916, and the Somme, which began on the 1st of July 1916. These were battles unprecedented in human history, and the human carnage was incredible. If you think the war in Ukraine now is bad by way of human life, it is, with all respect, minuscule compared to what happened on the Western Front, let alone the Eastern Front between Germany, Austria and Russia, and the Serbian Front between Austria, Serbia and Greece, and the Turkish fronts with Russia and Gallipoli, etc., etc. It was truly a world war. What happened first were the 3 visits of the Angel of Peace, or the Angel of Portugal, in spring, summer and autumn of 1916. This is before Our Lady's apparitions in 1917. To prepare the children, Lucia, Francisco and Jacinta, in catechesis, prayer, reparation and devotion to the Eucharist. What most people don't know is a prayer by the then Pope, Benedict XVI, on the 6th of May 1917. 6th of May, all right? This is 1 week before the first apparition of Our Lady at Fatima, in the context of the massive carnage of the First World War. In May 1917, the Western Front was about to collapse. The French had launched their own offensive, which was ruinous in the extreme, and the French army was in mutiny. The prayer of Pope Benedict XV was as follows, quote, "To Mary then, who is the mother of mercy and omnipotent by grace, let loving and devout appeal go up from every corner of the earth, from noble temples and tiniest chapels, from royal palaces and mansions of the rich, as from the poorest hut, from blood-drenched plains and seas. Let it bear to her the anguished cry of mothers and wives, the wailing of innocent little ones, the sighs of every generous heart, that her most tender and benign solicitude may be moved, and the peace we ask for be obtained for our agitated world." A prayer of the Pope asking Our Lady's intercession for peace in the world. The response comes 1 week later. These are the dates of the Marian apparitions. The 13th of May. Our Lady appears to the 3 children at the Cova da Iria and asks that they return for 5 more months in succession on the 13th day at the same hour. Also note the following. She said, "I want you to come here on the 13th of each month for the next 6 months, and at the very same hour. Later, I shall tell you who I am and what it is that I most desire. Afterwards, I shall return here yet a 7th time." Now, this is an opinion of someone. I can't verify this opinion, but the 7th time occurred on the 15th of June 1921. Mary came, put her hand on Lucia's shoulder and said, quote, "I am coming for the 7th time. Follow the path the bishop shows you, for this is the will of God." And this was a moment of great trial for Lucia at the time. Next apparition, 13 May. Our Lady tells the children that God wants to establish in the world devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. About 50 people come to the Cova da Iria to witness the apparition. 13th of July. Our Lady shows the children a vision of hell and tells them that she will come back at a later date to ask for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. She tells the children the secret in 3 parts, and I'll detail this soon enough, and promises to prove her appearances with a miracle on 13 October 1917. About 5,000 people came to the Cova on 13 July. 13 August. The children are kidnapped by the mayor of Orem and miss their appointed time meeting with Our Lady. About 15,000 people come to the Cova and many witness supernatural phenomena indicating that Our Lady had come nonetheless. 19th of August. Our Lady visits the children in nearby Valinos and again prophesies the working of a miracle in October while telling the children to pray and make sacrifices for sinners. 13 September. Our Lady tells the children that in October our Lord will come, as well as Our Lady appearing as Our Lady of Sorrows and Our Lady of Mount Carmel. Also, St. Joseph will appear with the child Jesus in order to bless the world. About 30,000 people come to the Cova, and again, many witness supernatural phenomena indicating Our Lady's presence. 13 October. Our Lady announces, quote, "People must amend their lives and ask pardon for their sins. They must not offend our Lord anymore, for he is already too much offended." She tells us to continue to pray the rosary every day. Then the 70,000 people present witness the miracle of the sun at the Cova. The sun spins in the sky and changes colour successively before falling to the earth in a terrifying manner. This is the only pre-announced public miracle in history 3 months in advance, and lasts for 12 minutes. Many of those present thought it was the end of the world, but the sun resumed its place in the sky to great cries of relief. Everyone was left completely dry despite the very heavy rains that had drenched the area for hours before midday. This miracle was witnessed by many skeptics, atheists, socialists, Freemasons, and the reporter from O Seculo, Avelino de Almeida. Hundreds of these were converted on the spot. Many spin-off miracles occurred, including cures from blindness, cancer, and crippling disabilities, etc. Now, there's a lot of information here, and you can get a little bit lost. It can be a bit bewildering, but I'll just have to be very trenchant here and proceed word by word. The content of the first secret in full. In her third memoir, written in 1941, Sister Lucia said that the first secret, a vision of hell, was disclosed to the children on 13 July 1917. Quote, "Our Lady showed us a great sea of fire, which seemed to be under the earth. Plunged in this fire were demons and souls in human form, like transparent burning embers, all blackened or burnished bronze, floating about in the conflagration, now raised into the air by the flames that issued from within themselves together with great clouds of smoke, now falling back on every side like sparks in a huge fire, without weight or equilibrium, and amid shrieks and groans of pain and despair, which horrified us and made us tremble with fear. The demons could be distinguished by their terrifying and repulsive likeness to frightful and unknown animals, all black and transparent. This vision lasted but an instant. How can we ever be grateful enough to our kind Heavenly Mother, who had already prepared us by promising in the first apparition to take us to heaven? Otherwise, I think we would have died of fear and terror. Content of the second secret in full. You have seen hell, where the souls of poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If what I say to you is done, many souls will be saved and there will be peace. The war is going to end, but if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out during the pontificate of Pope Pius XI. When you see a night illumined by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given you by God that he is about to punish the world for its crimes by means of war, famine, and persecutions of the Church and of the Holy Father. To prevent this, I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred. The Holy Father will have much to suffer. Various nations will be annihilated. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and she shall be converted, and a period of peace will be granted to the world. In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. Do not tell this to anybody. Francisco, yes, you may tell him. When you pray the rosary, say after each mystery, "O my Jesus, forgive us, save us from the fires of hell, lead all souls to heaven, especially those who are most in need." In her own memoir, Sister Lucia records the comments of Jacinta Marto regarding the future sufferings of the Pope. Quote, "I saw the Holy Father in a very big house, kneeling by the table, with his head buried in his hands, and he was weeping. Outside the house, there were many people. Some of them were throwing stones. Others were cursing him and using bad language. Poor Holy Father, we must pray very much for him." Now, some commentary on my part. How the above prophecies came to pass. Within just over a year, in November 1918, the First World War did come to an end. The strange light spoken of by Our Lady occurred on the 25th of January 1938. The huge aurora borealis that was seen right across the northern hemisphere. Even Adolf Hitler saw that borealis that time. The prophecy of a worse war in the pontificate of Pius XI, that is the Second World War. The real date for the beginning of the Second World War was not the 1st of September 1939 in Europe, nor the 7th of December 1941 in the Pacific. That's taking the Anglo-American perspective. The Second World War began not when Pius XII was Pope, but when Pius XI was still Pope, because the Second World War in Europe began when Hitler in his heart said, "I will take Austria," and then moved into Czechoslovakia before he invaded Poland. When Hitler saw the aurora borealis, for him that meant God was blessing his decision to take Austria, when God was really telling the world that in the heart of this evil man, war in Europe was to begin. In the Pacific War started on the 17th of September 1931. When Japan invaded Manchuria. And that war expanded in 1937 when Japan invaded China. Then the United States imposed sanctions, oil sanctions on Japan for that invasion. The bombing of Pearl Harbor was just the next phase of a war that had already begun in the reign of Pius XI. Russia spread in her errors, causing wars, persecuting the church and martyring the good, is well known. From the time the Russian Revolution began, within Russia, in Eastern Europe, in the Korean War, in the Vietnam War, and other revolutionary wars, the Soviets were sponsoring in the Third World for decades, persecuting the church within Russia and persecuting the church in Eastern Europe in particular. And that persecution spread, of course, to China. I should mention China, of course, it became communist in 1949, etc., etc. The Pope having much to suffer, that would be private. I can't give you specific examples except the assassination attempt on John Paul II on the 13th of May, 1981, which I believe must somehow be connected with the Fatima message having occurred on the 13th of May. And of course, that was Leonid Brezhnev, the premier of the Soviet Union, who ordered that assassination to squash what was happening in Poland at the time. And Sister Lucia also spoke elsewhere about a final battle between Christ and the devil over the family. That is happening now, without a doubt. What has not been fulfilled, and we'll look at these matters in more detail later, and these are areas of controversy, which is why I have question marks. So I'll say many people believe the consecration of Russia, specifically by name, in union with the bishops of the world, at least the moral majority, has not happened yet. It's a matter of debate. The communion of reparation of the first 5 Saturdays has happened, but has it happened sufficiently enough? Have enough faithful practice that devotion? Now, you're here tonight. I'll do a survey. Put up your hand if you have ever practiced the devotion of the communion of reparation of the first 5 Saturdays. Okay? About half of you. It'll be much less across the broader Catholic Church throughout the world. That's good. We've got half in this room. The other half will start on Saturday. Right. The conversion of Russia, question mark, has it sufficiently changed? Has it sufficiently converted? We've seen significant positive signs and improvement in recent decades, but has it been enough? Various nations being annihilated. I would say that has come true to some extent already. When you look at the Second World War, look what happened to Germany by the end of it. Look what happened to Japan by the end of it. Look what happened to Poland. Look what happened to the Western Soviet Union. These nations were annihilated. Incredible bombing raids and over 60 million people dying. But is there more to come? The next thing that has it been fulfilled or not? The triumph of the Immaculate Heart. It's debatable. There are good people in this room who debate in favour of that, and there are others who debate and question that. The period of peace. Are we living in a period of peace? Have we ever lived in any period of peace in the 20th century or the first decades of the 21st century? I got a big question mark there as well. Right, now we move to the content of the third secret, which was revealed on the 26th of May in the year 2000. On the 2nd of January 1944, Our Lady appears to Sister Lucia and bids her to write down the third secret. Our Lady asks it to be revealed to the world not before 1960. So she didn't say it must be revealed in 1960, not before. When later asked by Cardinal Otto Vianney why the people had to wait for the third secret to be revealed in 1960, Sister Lucia states, quote, because the Blessed Virgin wishes it so. And, quote, it, that is the third secret, will be clearer then. So there has to be something happening around 1960 that makes the meaning of the third secret more clear. The third secret is in 2 parts, and this is where it gets complex. You could get lost in the next few minutes here. The third secret is in 2 parts. The vision in 62 lines, on 4 sheets of paper. The words of Our Lady in 25 lines, on 1 sheet of paper. Keep that in mind, 62 lines, 25 lines. 4 sheets of paper, 1 sheet of paper. These are delivered to the Bishop of Fatima, Bishop de Silva, on the 17th of June 1944. The following is the vision of 62 lines. Just the vision. Quote, "After the two parts which I have already explained, at the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand. Flashing, it gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire. But they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, 'Penance, penance, penance.' And we saw in an immense light that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it, a bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men and women religious, going up a steep mountain, at the top of which there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks as of a cork tree with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city, half in ruins and half trembling with halting step, afflicted with pain and sorrow. He prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on his way. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the foot of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way, there died one after another the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. Beneath the two arms of the cross there were two angels, each with a crystal aspersorium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs, and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God." Close quote. And this was recorded by Sister Lucia in Tuai, 3rd of January 1944. Right, and we move forward. The Apparitions of Pontevedra, Spain, 1925 to 26, to Sister Lucia in the convent of the Dorotheans. Okay, we know she ends up being a Carmelite, but before she was a Carmelite, she was with the Dorotheans. What were these apparitions? Our Lady and the child Jesus came to reveal to Lucia the first part of God's plan for the salvation of sinners in our time of revolt against God. The reparatory communion of the first Saturdays of the month. Lucia, referring to herself in the third person, describes the encounter. Quote, "Look, my daughter, at my heart, surrounded with thorns with which ungrateful men pierce me at every moment by their blasphemies and ingratitude. You at least tried to console me and announce in my name that I promised to assist at the moment of death with all the graces necessary for salvation, all those who, on the first Saturday of 5 consecutive months, shall receive the sacrament of confession, receive Holy Communion, recite 5 decades of the Rosary, and keep me company for 15 minutes while meditating on the 15 mysteries of the Rosary, with the intention of making reparation to my Immaculate Heart." Sister Lucia's confessor later gave her a series of questions about the apparitions at Pontevedra. One of the questions was, why 5 Saturdays and not 9 or 7, in honour of the sorrows of Our Lady? Jesus' response came on the night of the 29-30 May 1930. Quote, "My daughter, the reason is simple. There are 5 kinds of offences and blasphemies uttered against the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Blasphemies against the Immaculate Conception. Blasphemies against her perpetual virginity. Blasphemies against her divine maternity, while refusing at the same time to recognise her as Mother of men. The blasphemies of those who publicly seek to place in the hearts of children indifference or scorn, or even hatred towards this Immaculate Mother. The offences of those who outrage her directly in her holy images." Now, I'll just pause here for a moment. There are all sorts of people who commit these blasphemies. Sadly, much of Protestantism is opposed to these dogmas and these beliefs of Our Lady. Now, our Lord doesn't mention Protestantism, but that's what comes to mind when I hear about these categories of blasphemies. Right, next, the revelation of the Dorothean convent in Tui, 13 June 1929. This is critical. This is a critical moment here. It was at Tui that Our Lady's promise contained in the secret of 13 July 1917 was fulfilled. Quote, "I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia. It's on this day, 13 June 1929, Our Lady comes to ask for this." Sister Lucia had an apparition of the Most Holy Trinity. Near the right arm of the cross was Our Lady, and in her hand was her Immaculate Heart. Lucia described the communication as follows, quote, "Then Our Lady said to me, 'The moment has come in which God asked the Holy Father,' then Pius XI, 'to make in union with all the bishops of the world the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart, promising to save it by this means.'" That still is relevant. The consecration is not a weapon against Russia. It's to save Russia. "So numerous are the souls which the justice of God condemns for sins committed against me, that I come to ask for reparation. Sacrifice yourself with this intention and pray." In 1917, the Holy Father, Benedict XV, had asked the Blessed Mother to obtain the peace of the world. And like a loving mother, Our Lady readily consented, but on the condition of the Holy Fathers and the Church's faithful cooperation with the heavenly plan. The apparition of Riaño, Spain, August 1931. In August 1931, our Lord appeared to Sister Lucia to complain of the tardiness of his ministers, Pope Pius XI, sadly, who delay the consecration of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, as requested by Our Lady of Fatima 2 years and 2 months earlier. Sister Lucia reported to her bishop the important revelation. These are the words of Christ, August 1931. Quote, "Make it known to my ministers, given that they follow the example of the King of France in delaying the execution of my command. They will follow him into misfortune." These are grave words. Popes will follow the King of France into misfortune. It is never too late to have recourse to Jesus and Mary. In another text, Sister Lucia wrote, quote, "Later, through an intimate communication, our Lord complained to me. They did not wish to heed my request. Like the King of France, they will repent of it. And they will do it, but it will be late. Russia will have already spread its errors in the world, provoking wars and persecutions against the Church. The Holy Father will have much to suffer." Our Lord was here making an explicit reference to the request of the Sacred Heart of Jesus given to St. Margaret Mary Alacoque on 17 June 1689 to the King of France. As a result of the refusal of King Louis XIV, as well as the refusal of both his son and grandson, Louis XV and Louis XVI, to publicly consecrate France to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, as was requested by heaven, the secret Masonic anti-church successfully carried out the great upheaval of the French Revolution. On 17 June 1789, the Feast of the Sacred Heart, exactly 100 years to the day when St. Margaret Mary had written down the great designs of heaven for the King, the Third Estate rose up and proclaimed itself a national assembly, stripping King Louis XVI of his legislative power. Languishing in prison, awaiting his inevitable execution, Louis XVI poured out his heart to our Lord in the form of a promissory note, wherein Louis took the solemn vow to finally consecrate France to our Lord's Sacred Heart, should he be restored as sovereign of France. Sadly, this proved to be too little, too late, and he was not a king of France anymore. On 21 January 1793, the soldiers of the French Revolution executed Louis XVI by guillotine as if he were a common criminal. Misfortune had befallen both the king and his country. This would include the Reign of Terror and the war in the Vendée, where hundreds of thousands of bishops, priests, religious and lay Catholics would be killed. However, it would not be just France that would inherit misfortune. In the years that followed the Sacred Heart apparitions, Western civilization would drift further away from the light of the gospel. Beforehand, there was the Renaissance, the Protestant Reformation. Just before, during, and after the French Revolution, there was the so-called Enlightenment. Afterwards, the Napoleonic Wars and their devastation, and including the imprisonment of Pius VI and Pius VII. Then we had rationalism, liberalism, socialism, then the Russian Revolution. All phases of the one great revolt against God. A revolt the consecration to the Sacred Heart would have forestalled if it was done. What did we see after the failure to consecrate Russia in 1929-31? What are we seeing now? This might not be a complete list. Worldwide economic depression beginning in October 1929 with the Wall Street stock market crash. The rise of fascism in Italy, Nazism in Germany, militarism in Japan, leading, of course, to the Second World War. The atrocities of the Mexican and Spanish civil wars. The Stalinist purges killing tens of millions of people within Russia. The Ukrainian genocide, the Holodomor, which virtually no one has heard of. Put your hand up if you've heard of the Holodomor. 7 million Ukrainians starved to death by Stalin deliberately in 1932-33 when the Ukrainians resisting the collectivization of Stalin were cut off and starved to death. The Second World War and the Holocaust involving 6 million Jews, the Second World War killing at least 55 million people. The rise of the Soviet Union and its domination of Eastern Europe. The fall of China to communism in 1949. The Korean and Vietnam wars. Countless other wars in the Middle East, Africa, Asia stoked by communism. The corruption of the world through Hollywood movies, the rise of sex, drugs and rock and roll culture, the Woodstock culture, the sexual revolution and rampant sexual promiscuity, the preponderance of pornography choking our atmosphere, the Hugh Hefner Playboy culture, huge rise in divorce rates, the collapse of the extended and nuclear family, the steady decline of marriage rates, the ubiquitous corrupting influence of television, radio, the internet, etc. Monstrous abortion levels worldwide. Contraceptive sterilisation culture, declining birth rates. The rise of radical and militant anti-Christian feminism. The ascendancy of the LGBTQI and the imposition of pseudo-gay marriage. The reality-denying transgender movement. The progressive imposition of euthanasia, voluntary and involuntary. The radicalisation and growth of Islam in the West, the steady rise of atheism and the advent of the new atheism, the steady rise of postmodernism and its denial of objective truth, the public manifestation and activism of the Satanist movement in the United States, especially during and after the Obama administration, the rise of the culturally Marxist woke dominance of universities in the corporate world and media, the rise of the anti-family, anti-Christian, Marxist, BLM and Antifa movements. The cultural decline and the threatening the collapse of the United States. The rise of China to superpower status and its growing aggression. Communist regimes still in Vietnam, North Korea, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, supported by the current governments in Russia and China. The persecution of Christian believers in dozens of countries across the world, particularly by Islamic regimes. The massive debt levels of all nations, $337 trillion of debt as of the 1st of August 2020. The infiltration of the church over centuries beforehand and after 1929 by Freemasons, communists and homosexuals, especially since 1929, and we know that through the testimony of Bella Dodds to the US Senate in the 1950s, she herself was personally responsible for infiltrating into the Catholic Church in the United States over 1,100 communist spies into religious houses and seminaries, etc. The doctrinal revolt of theologians and clergy post-Vatican II and Humanae Vitae. The virtual collapse of effective Catholic education in schools. The wholesale apostasy of many Catholic universities. The collapse of priestly and religious vocations in many parts of the church. The abuses of the liturgy post-Vatican II. The collapse of the Catholic mass attendance in the West. The defection of tens of thousands of priests and religious. Massive apostasies of laity leaving the Catholic Church in all parts of the world, North and Central South America in particular. The explosion of the sex abuse crisis within the Catholic Church. The current persecution of Orthodox faithful Catholics within our own church. The COVID-inspired lockdown of our churches and restriction of the sacraments. The current Ukrainian-Russia war besides other wars. All of the above and more. We are now in the age of diabolical disorientation. Together, all of the above constitute the revolution or the great revolt against God. What we have seen since the late Middle Ages is a continuous movement in different phases, with one father, the devil, and one aim, the establishment of the reign of Satan in the world. Attempts to stop Russia since 1929 and obtain peace through military action has failed miserably. Go back to the Old Testament. When the Jews sought to win battles on their own strength, they failed. Rather than relying on God's strength, they presumed to rely on their own. Instead of heeding the message of Our Lady of Fatima, consecrating Russia, etc., etc., the West sought to stop communism by its own human means. We'll bomb the communists off the map. We saw it in the Korean War, in the Vietnam War, and we saw the United States principally involved in those wars and failed even worse in Vietnam. Because that is not the solution to the spread of communism in the world. There was another plan, heaven's plan. Nor can the New World Order, the deep state, the Great Reset, the World Economic Forum, George Soros, Bill Gates' agendas be countered by our own worldly plans or structures. Certainly by no alternative governments in the world. Whatever clots they may have of goodness, no government in the world is in a position to stop this agenda. Because there's another plan heaven has to stop this agenda. We are now on the cusp of another 100th anniversary, 13 June 1929 to 13 June 2029. The Western world is deserving of great chastisement. We are either on the verge of a great chastisement, and my view, and this is where you're free to disagree, I see the West is in a hopeless situation morally, culturally, socially, religiously. In the ancient world, when Israel, the people of God, apostatized, Israel, the northern kingdom, was destroyed by Assyria. Judah, the southern kingdom, was destroyed by Babylon. My private opinion, the instruments of chastisement being set up now against the West in Europe and the Pacific we would be Russia and China as instruments of punishment on the apostate West. Things cannot continue as they are. If the solemn consecration of Russia by the Pope, together with all the Catholic bishops of the world, does not happen, and this is a private opinion, you don't have to accept it. does not happen by June 13, 2029, perhaps the world could expect then or beforehand further calamities beyond what we are now experiencing. Attempts to consecrate Russia. Pope Pius XII on the 31st of October and the 8th of December 1942, acting alone, consecrates the world, but not Russia, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Our Lord appears to Sister Lucia and says, "This is not what I asked for, but because it was done, I will shorten the wall." So there was a benefit because it was still a good and holy act. Not what it was asked for, but Germany and Japan never won another major battle again. When these consecrations occurred, the great battles in the world at the time were Stalingrad, El Alamein in North Africa, and Guadalcanal in the Pacific. Germany lost both those battles, and after 6 months, Japan was defeated at Guadalcanal, and they never won another major battle again. May 1952. Our Lady appears to Sister Lucia saying, "Make it known to the Holy Father," now Pius XII, "that I am always awaiting the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart. Without that consecration, Russia will not be able to convert. Without that consecration, the world cannot have peace." 7th of July 1952, Pope Pius XII, in a written papal bull, Sacra Regenti, consecrates the peoples of Russia specifically, but that he does not ask for the bishops of the world to join him, and thus he is not joined by the Catholic bishops of the world. We'll see what flowed from that in a few moments. On the 21st of November 1964, Pope Paul VI renews in the presence of the Fathers of the Vatican Council, but without their participation, the consecration of the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. On the 13th of May 1982, Pope St. John Paul II consecrates the world, but not Russia, at Fatima. Quote, "In a special way, we entrust and consecrate to you those individuals and nations which particularly need to be entrusted and consecrated. The bishops of the world do not participate in this consecration." In October 1983, again, John Paul II at the Synod of Bishops renews the 1982 consecration. On the 25th of March 1984, again, John Paul II makes another consecration. Quote, "In a special way, we entrust and consecrate to you those individuals and nations which particularly need to be thus entrusted and consecrated." But moments after the consecration, St. John Paul II added some unscripted, off-the-cuff remarks in which he implored Our Lady of Fatima to, quote, "enlighten especially the peoples of which you yourself are awaiting our consecration and confiding." 350 bishops agreed to participate in this consecration, but this was less than 20% of the world number in 1984. On 13th of October 2013, Pope Francis consecrates the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Perceived benefits flowing from some of the above consecrations. I've already mentioned the first benefits of the 1942 consecration. It is wrong, as many commentators say, and in my opinion, it is wrong to say that these consecrations were invalid. It is more correct to say that perhaps they were incomplete or imperfect vis-a-vis Our Lady's requests. They are still holy and meritorious actions. So I told you what happened from the 31st of October 42 consecration. The war was shortened, saved countless millions of lives. On the 7th of July 1952, that consecration was followed by the death of Stalin on the 5th of March 1953, ending his plans of further great purges which would have killed millions of more people. And after that tyrant's death, a very slow process of mild liberalisation began in the Soviet Union. Positive changes in Russia and the world after the 1982, 83, 84 consecration. The fall of the Berlin Wall, November 1989. The liberation of the Eastern Bloc nations from Soviet domination. The collapse of the Soviet Union on Christmas Day 1991. 28,000 plus reopened Orthodox churches in Russia. Vladimir Putin speaking openly about the tragic decline of Christianity in the West. Vladimir Putin appearing in Russian Orthodox churches to pray and allows the Russian Orthodox Church to thrive and have political influence. Vladimir Putin has placed tighter restrictions on abortion in Russia, the first nation to introduce this horror back in the 1920s. This happened in 2011. Vladimir Putin supports the banning of internet sites promoting child pornography, drugs and suicide, done in 2012. Vladimir Putin supports the banning of intentional public blasphemy and desecration in 2013. Vladimir Putin has supported the Christians in the Middle East by militarily supporting the Assad regime against extreme Islamist forces in Syria, 2015 onwards. And most notably, banning LGBTQI and transgender propaganda in Russia in 2013. Now, some of you might debate whether they're good things. I have put them as good things because some of these things might not be perfect, but they prevent worse things. You might not like Assad in Syria. I never have, but I like him slightly more than those Islamist terrorists who would have wiped out Christianity in Syria and in Lebanon. Question. So it appears that Russia has been consecrated and converted, and the message of Our Lady of Fatima fulfilled. Sister Lucia's positions on the 1982, 83, 84 consecrations, particularly 82, 84. On the 12th of May 1982, a day before the 82 consecration, the Roman Catholic paper L'Osservatore Romano publishes an article by Father Umberto Maria Pasquali, a well-known Salesian priest who has known Sister Lucia since 1939 and had received over 150 written letters from her, revealing that Sister Lucia clearly and emphatically told him that Our Lady of Fatima never asked for the consecration of the world, but only the consecration of Russia. Father Pasquali also publishes a photographically reproduced copy of a handwritten note by Sister Lucia attesting to their conversation on this point. The day after the above consecration, 14 May 1982, Sister Lucia stated in the presence of Bishop Hilnilka, Don Luigi Bianchi, and the Provincial of the Carmelites that God wanted, quote, the consecration of Russia and only Russia without addition, close quote. 19 March 1983. Sister Lucia meets with the Papal Nuncio and confirms that the consecration of Russia was not done because Russia was not clearly the object of the consecration. And the Catholic bishops of the world did not join in. She further stated, quote, Pope John Paul II simply renewed the consecration of the world executed by Pius XII on October 31, 1942. From this consecration we can expect some benefits, but not the conversion of Russia. Then we have the interview published in the Sol de Fatima magazine, September 1985, regarding the 1984 consecration, March 25, 84. Quote, this is Sister Lucia's own words. There was no participation of all the bishops, and there was no mention of Russia. The interviewer then asked, so the consecration was not done as requested by Our Lady? Sister Lucia answered, no. Many bishops attached no importance to this act. They're not my words, they're Sister Lucia's words. Sister Lucia repeated this opinion on the 25th of April 1987 to family members in her convent. In an interview with Enrico Romero, published 20 July 1987, and in comments to Cardinal Augustin Mayer on the 25th of October 1987, and to Cardinal Stickler on the 26th of November 1987. In July 1989, Father Messias Coelho reveals that Sister Lucia and others had received an instruction from unidentified persons in the Vatican, stating that she and they must now say that the consecration of Russia was completed on 25 March 1984. Sister Lucia's letter to Sister Mary of Bethlehem, 29th of August 1989. Quote, "They then asked me if it was made as Our Lady requested. And I said, yes, now it was made." Close quote. Problems with the 29th of August 89 letter. Now, this is not my information. This is extracted from this book, The Secret, Still Hidden. So I'm giving you an opinion of someone, Christopher Ferrara. The 1989 letter, 29th of August 89 letter, purportedly by Sister Lucia. It was typewritten. Sister Lucia had previously written hundreds of letters only in her own handwriting. Sister Lucia could not type, and this was attested to by her sister Carolina on 11 October 1990 and admitted by Cardinal Bertone. The letter stated that the consecration of the world was the request of Our Lady, not ever true. Never did Our Lady ask for the consecration of the world. The 89 letter stated that Pope Paul VI, quote, consecrated the world on May 13, 1967, when Pope Paul VI was at Fatima. A clear factual error. Sister Lucia was there that day at Fatima, 13th of May, 67. She knew what happened. Paul VI did this consecration of the world on the 21st of November, 1964. In all previous letters, Sister Lucia dated them at the top, not at the end as with this letter. In all previous letters, Sister Lucia began with JMJ, not J cross M, as with this letter. A forensic handwritten expert, Dr. M.N. Bunker, concluded that Lucia's signature on the 89 letter, as it appears, quote, is inconsistent with previous signatures as to slant, thickness and wavering of strokes, blobs, accents and flourishes. A computer expert had concluded that Sister Lucia's 1989 letter was typed on an IBM compatible computer which used the WordStar software package. Sister Lucia's convent did not possess such a computer or software system in 1989. Then we have another letter of Sister Lucia written to Walter Nolka on the 8th of November 1989. Yes, it has been made as requested by Our Lady on 25th of March 1984. Problems with the 8th of the 11th 1989 letter. Precisely the same problems as with the 29th of August letter. Indicates the same person wrote both letters. Plus, there is a factual error stating that Pope Pius XII made a veiled mention of Russia in his 1942 consecration. Pope Pius XII made no such mention of Russia in the 1942 consecration. It was this letter, 8th of the 11th, 89, that Cardinal Bertone relied upon in June 2000 in claiming that the 1984 consecration was valid. There are other letters of Sister Lucia to Father Paul Kramer, 30 Days Magazine, Father Robert J. Fox, from November 89 to July 1990. All these also contain problems. Then we have a Vatican order on Sister Lucia. From 1990 onwards, Sister Lucia was prohibited by Vatican officials from speaking to anyone about Fatima, even to her longtime confessor, Father Jose Aparicio. She was only allowed short visits by close relatives and friends, and then only in the company of other sisters. Why this silence if Sister Lucia had already agreed that the 1984 consecration had, quote, satisfied heaven? On the 20th of December 2001, the Osservatore Romano publishes the secret interview with Sister Lucia, conducted by Cardinal Bertone on the 17th of November 2001 at the convent in Coimbra. According to Cardinal Bertone, Sister Lucia said that the consecration of the world in 1984 had been, quote, accepted by heaven. But yet never asked Sister Lucia if she wrote or signed the contested letters that Cardinal Bertone relies upon to tell us that Sister Lucia said it was done. No transcript or other independent record of this interview is provided. On the 13th of February 2005, Sister Lucia of Fatima dies less than 2 months short of her 98th birthday. Claim. In a few minutes, we'll have a short break. Claim. Pope St. John Paul II paused and whispered the name of Russia in the 1984 consecration. If so, it was then done properly. If so, we still have a serious problem. Namely, the other 350 bishops co-consecrating with St. John Paul II did not know of or hear this mention of Russia. Therefore, they could not be said to be consecrating Russia with him. They only consecrated according to the official text, which did not mention Russia by name. So, no consecration of Russia by St. John Paul II in union with the bishops of the world could be said to have occurred in 1984. Final summation. Logically, if we accept the thesis that the world equals Russia, then St. John Paul II's 1984 consecration was good and holy, etc., but in effect unnecessary, as we had previously 2 other papal consecrations of the world beforehand, by Pope Pius XII in 1942 and Pope Paul VI in 1964. Question for debate. Has Russia converted? I've mentioned many positive things a few moments ago, which could be easily argued as fruits of the 1982, 83, 84 consecrations, and I'm accepting of those arguments. But there are still issues. These are the arguments against the type of conversion I believe Our Lady of Fatima desires of Russia. The Russian Orthodox Church is still not in full communion with Rome. The Russian Orthodox still do not believe in the Fatima message. The Russian Orthodox Church still does not believe in the Immaculate Conception or Heart of Mary as a doctrine. The religious status of Russia, I think as of 2020, 61.35 million are Orthodox, 18.6 million are atheist, 9 million are Muslim, 180,000 are Catholic. 100 times more Muslims than Catholics in Russia. Catholicism is still not an officially recognized religion in Russia. The officially recognized religions in Russia are the Orthodox Church or churches, Islam, Judaism, and Buddhism. The practicing rates, now we've seen a big climb upwards in the number of churches, Orthodox churches in Russia, a positive development. Practicing rates of adult Russians at the moment is somewhere between 6 and 8%. That's a little bit lower than the practicing rates of Catholics in this country now. Russia, sadly, is still a world leader in alcoholism, reducing the average age of men to only 64. Russia, sadly, is the 3rd worst in the world for suicide rates, behind Korea and Hungary. It is the 3rd worst in the world for the raw numbers of murders. 47,000 per year, China 38,000, the United States 19,400 in 2020. These are 2020 figures. Russia is the 3rd worst in the world for the divorce rate. 3.9 people per 1,000 divorce every year. China is 3.2. The United States is 2.7. The fertility rate in Russia in 2019 was 1.5. The the USA 1.7, the Ukraine 1.23. The abortion rate in Russia, 53.7 women per 1,000 have an abortion in Russia every year. China, 24.2 per 1,000. The United States, 20.8 per 1,000. Australia, 19.7 per 1,000 women per year. Russia ranks 136 in the world's corruption index, equal to Lebanon. Russia still facilitates the existence of communist regimes in those countries I mentioned earlier. Russia has an alliance, quote, without limits with communist atheist China. Russia, the power structure, is essentially a kleptocracy, an oligarchy. Vladimir Putin, I mentioned his positives. By the way, there's no world leader, maybe Duda in Poland, Orban in Hungary, that I'm mostly confident with. Everything I might say about Putin, I can say certainly incredibly horrible things about Biden, about Obama, and some things about Obama and Biden worse than Putin. Even Trump, I know there's a lot of Trump fans in this room now, but we've got to look with both eyes, look at his positives, look at his negatives. Trump advanced the LGBTQI agenda in the United States. He did not block it. Pro-life, anti-abortion, good on him, big ticks there. Putin's own personal issues is that, according to all reports, he's a massive kleptocrat, siphoning tens of billions of dollars out of the Russian economy into his own private bank accounts. No doubt he's a political assassin and murderer of many of his political opponents. I can name a few here. Litvinenko, Yevchenko, the accountant who sought to investigate the massive kleptocracy in Russia, Sergei Magnitsky, Nemtsov, Navalny. This political oppression affects the legitimacy of elections in Russia. He is a known adulterer. He flicked off his wife in 2013 and has a liaison with an ex-Olympian, very beautiful young woman, has had children with that woman. He's a hardcore nationalist. It's good to be a nationalist to some extent. And he's an irredentist, which means he desires the restoration of the political boundaries of Russia as they were before the fall of the Berlin Wall, before the fall of the Soviet Union. So there are problems. I don't want to say Putin is worse than many other serious leaders in this world. I'll say something very controversial. If there was an election, and on the election, presidential election, there was Putin's name, and there was Biden's name, there was Obama's name, and there was Trudeau's name, and there were whatever other names. Out of those four, if I was to say who's the least evil, I'll probably vote for Putin. But I'm saying here, let's not develop a cult mentality where we look at a political leader, whoever that person may be, and say, hey, they're a clean skin, they're perfect. I pin my allegiance to that leader, and he is or she is the one that's going to be the solution to the world's problems. That is not the case with any leader, political leader in the world now. I'm going to hold the microphone in my hand because people at the back can't necessarily hear me. I apologise for that. Now we get to the next critical question, the continuing controversies regarding the contents of the third secret of Fatima. On the 16th of April 1957, now just to remind you, there's a 62-line part of the secret relating to the vision, and there's a 25-line part of the secret relating to the text. The 62 lines is in 4 sheets of paper, and the 25-line section on 1 piece of paper. Keep that in mind. 16th of April, 1957. The 25-line text of the third secret, sealed with wax in the original envelope and the Bishop of Fatima's outer envelope, is received in the Vatican. The text is placed in a safe in the papal apartments, not in the Holy Office. On the 17th of August 1959, Pope St. John the 23rd reads with the aid of a translator the 25-line text of the third secret. These are the words of Our Lady, which was taken from the papal apartment, and then has his personal secretary, Monsignor Loris Capavilla, write on the envelope, quote, I leave it to others to comment or decide. Father Malachi Martin, who was also working for Pope John the 23rd at the time, also reads the third secret in full, this 25 lines. So John the 23rd reads it. He also says, this does not pertain to my pontificate. I leave it to others to comment or decide. On the 8th of February 1960, an unnamed person who was close to the Pope authorises the press to quote him anonymously that the third secret would not be revealed in 1960 and would, quote, would probably remain forever under absolute seal. Sister Lucia is officially forbidden to speak about the third secret and not allowed to receive any visitors except close relatives and people she has known for a long time. Her own confessor of many years returns from Brazil and is not allowed to see her. Sometime in 1960, Pope John the 23rd reads the 62-line text of the third secret, that is the vision. So he now reads the other part. He's read the 25-line part, now he reads the 62-line part, contained in another sealed envelope. Unlike the first text, this text posed no difficulty for the Pope, and he was able to comprehend it completely on his own reading. On the 27th of June 1963, less than a week after becoming Pope, Paul VI reads the 25-line text of the third secret, kept in the papal apartment, after the substitute Secretary of State telephones Monsignor Capavilla, personal secretary to Pope John the 23rd, to inquire as to where to find it. Capavilla testifies to this fact in a certified note on the 17th of May 1967. It is this text, the one which contains Our Lady's words, that is later identified by Cardinal Ottaviani as being 25 lines long. I know this is getting a little bit bewildering. Remember, in 1960, the Vatican issued a press release stating that it was most probable the third secret would remain forever under absolute seal. The Vatican communique ended, quote, although the Church recognises the Fatima apparitions, she does not desire to take the responsibility of guaranteeing the veracity of the words of the three shepherd children said that the Virgin Mary had addressed to them. One opponent of Fatima, Father Edouard Danis, S.J., as Jesuit, said something similar, quote, it is not easy to state precisely what degree of credence is to be given to the accounts of Sister Lucia. A good person can be sincere, but have a propensity for unconscious fabrication. Even Cardinal Ratzinger said in the June 26, 2000 announcement, quote, Lucia may have seen in devotional books the projections of the inner world of children. On the 27th of March 1965, Pope Paul VI reads the other text of the third secret, the one that is 62 lines long. On the 16th of October 1978, John Paul II is elected Pope and reads a text of the third secret, the 25-line text that is kept in the papal apartment within days of his election, according to a statement to Associated Press in May 2000 by his spokesman, Joachim Navarro Valls. On the 13th of May 1981, Pope St. John Paul II was shot and seriously wounded by an assassin. Of course, who was behind that? It was Brezhnev in the Soviet Union. On the 18th of July 1981, Pope John Paul II reads the other 62-line text of the third secret, shortly after the assassination attempt on his life in May. Why no release in 1960? John the 23rd had reportedly also said that the third secret, quote, does not apply to my pontificate. The contents most probably ran counter to his plans for the Second Vatican Council. Cardinal Ottaviani, now at the time, I've mentioned his name already, who is he? He's the head of the Holy Office, right? The then name for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. At that time, second in charge of the church, at that time. Cardinal Ottaviani related that Pope John the 23rd placed the secret, quote, in one of those archives, which are like a very deep, dark well, to the bottom of which papers fall, and no one is able to see them anymore. Another cardinal, Silvio Oddi, asked Pope John the 23rd during a private audience why he did not make the secret public in 1960. He responded with a weary sigh and said, "Don't bring that subject up with me, please." There's also what's called the Metz Pact of 1962, signed by Cardinal Tisserand on behalf of the Vatican. Under this agreement, the Vatican agreed not to condemn either Russia or communism in the documents of Vatican II, in return for a promise that Russia cease persecuting the Catholic Church within its borders and allowed 2 Orthodox prelates to attend the council. Soviet Russia never fulfilled the first part of this promise. Was the third secret revealed in full on the 26th of June 2000? When it came out, my own private opinion, I was underwhelmed. I thought, was that it? And then I thought, what about that line, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved in Portugal, etc. And I thought, oh, okay. Then I just let it go. Didn't really focus on it. Contents of the etc. Quote, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. So there's text that follows that line. These words were added to the end of the second secret by Sister Lucia when composing her 4th memoirs in October-December 1941. They are, in effect, the beginning words of the undisclosed third secret. Yet, they do not appear in the 62-line text of the vision released by the Vatican in June 2000. So that should be May 2000. This is because they are instead found in the beginning of the unreleased 25-line text of Our Lady's words, fully written by Sister Lucia under Our Lady's command of January 1944. 2nd of September 1949, Austrian Jesuit Father Joseph Schwegel is sent by Pope Pius XII to Coimbra, Portugal, to interrogate Sister Lucia about the third secret. Father Schwegel later confides to one of his colleagues, quote, I cannot reveal anything of what I learned at Fatima concerning the third secret, but I can say that it has 2 parts. One concerns the Pope. The other, logically, although I must say nothing, would have to be the continuation of the words, in Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved, etc. Comments by Cardinal Ottaviani in 1967, quote, to avoid something so delicate, not destined for public consumption, come for whatever reason, even fortuitous, to fall into alien hands. So that's some general statement about why it wasn't released in 1960. Comments by St. John Paul II in 1981. Quote, given the seriousness of the contents, my predecessors in the Petrine office diplomatically preferred to postpone publication so as not to encourage the world power of communism to make certain moves. Comments of Cardinal Ratzinger in 1984. In the Ratzinger report that the third secret, these were comments in the Ratzinger report, that the third secret of Fatima has to do with what he called the De Novissimi. The Latin expression De Novissimus means, quote, dealing with the end times, pertaining to the latter days, or about the final events. On the 10th of September 1984, Bishop Alberto Cosme do Amaral, the Bishop of Fatima, declares during a question and answer session in the Technical University of Vienna, Austria, quote, "The third secret's content concerns only our faith. To identify the secret with catastrophic announcements or with a nuclear holocaust is to deform the meaning of the message. The loss of faith of a continent is worse than the annihilation of a nation. And it is true that faith is continually diminishing in Europe." Now, some of these comments, as we'll then and we'll see soon enough, seem to contradict. I'll give my own opinion as to what is in the third secret, unrevealed in a few moments. Comments of Father Malachi Martin, 1998, on the Art Bell radio show. Father Malachi Martin did about 7 of these interviews from 1996 to 98. He says the following, quote, "Besides, it's a question of shock, of frightening people, of polarising society. I can't do that. This will fill up the confessionals on Saturday evening. It will fill up the churches with worshippers striking their breasts." Remember, he read the third secret in full, I think twice. 1998, Howard D., former Philippine ambassador to the Vatican, said in an interview with Inside the Vatican magazine that, quote, "Bishop Ito, the local bishop of Akita, now deceased, was certain Akita was an extension of Fatima. And Cardinal Ratzinger personally confirmed to me that these two messages of Fatima and Akita are essentially the same." Close quote. At Akita in Japan on 13 October 1973, Our Lady said there would be a worldwide chastisement for sins in which a great part of humanity would be killed and that those who survive would envy the dead. Comments of Cardinal Silvio Oddi, quote, "The prophecy of Fatima was completely defied. It is a lack of sense, I would say, because according to the interpretation that seems to me most worthy of consideration, the third secret, which John the 23rd and his successors thought inopportune to reveal, is not about a supposed conversion of Russia, still far from becoming a reality, but regards the revolution in the Catholic Church." Elsewhere, Cardinal Oddi said, "The third secret has nothing to do with Gorbachev." That is the Premier of the Soviet Union in the late 80s. "The Blessed Virgin was alerting us against apostasy in the Church." Comments of Cardinal Giappi in 1995. In a personal communication to Professor Baumgartner in Salzburg, Austria, Cardinal Mario Luigi Giappi, the personal theologian of Pope John Paul II and of 4 popes before him, reveals that, quote, "In the third secret it is foretold, among other things, that the great apostasy in the church will begin at the top." Comments of Mother Angelica, 16th of May 2001, quote, "As for the secret, well, I happen to be one of those individuals who thinks we didn't get the whole thing. I told ya, I mean, you have the right to your own opinion, don't you, Father? There you know, that's my opinion, because I think it's scary." On the 31st of May 2007, Cardinal Bertone appears by remote live feed on the very popular Italian TV talk show Porta a Porta to respond to Sochi's book, The Fourth Secret of Fatima. During this telecast, Cardinal Bertone displays not only the text of the vision, that's the 62-line part, but also 2 separate sealed envelopes prepared by Sister Lucia, each bearing the explicit statement in Sister Lucia's own handwriting that, quote, "By express order of Our Lady, this envelope can be opened in 1960 only by the Cardinal Patriarch of Lisbon or by the Bishop of Liera." The 2 sealed envelopes confirm the existence of 2 texts comprising the third secret in its entirety. Comments of Cardinal Capavilla. An audio tape of Cardinal Capavilla's statements to a journalist named Paulini during a meeting on the 21st of June 2007. On the tape, Cardinal Capavilla is heard to state, quote, Besides the 4 pages of the vision of the bishop dressed in white, there was also something else, an attachment, yes. Cardinal Capevilla has revealed that St. John the 23rd kept the second text hidden, quote, in the right-hand drawer of the writing desk called Barbarigo, in the bedroom, close quote. As the reporter from Il Giornale concludes, Cardinal Capevilla's statement, quote, would confirm the thesis of the existence of a second sheet with the interpretation of the secret, namely the words of the Virgin Mary following the etc. Comments of Father Dollinger, Pentecost 2016. Not long after the June 2000 publication of the Third Secret of Fatima by the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger told Father Dollinger during an in-person conversation that there is still a part of the Third Secret they have not published. Quote, there is more than what we published, Cardinal Ratzinger said. He also told Father Dollinger that the published part of the secret is authentic and that the unpublished part of the secret speaks about, quote, a bad council and a bad mass that was to come in the near future. The Vatican responded to this immediately. In this regard, Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI declared, quote, never to have spoken with Professor Dollinger about Fatima, clearly affirming that the remarks attributed to Professor Dollinger on the matter are, quote, pure inventions absolutely untrue. And he confirms decisively that, quote, the publication of the Third Secret of Fatima is complete. Now, as an aside here, if you're getting confused, I understand, okay? This is a battle about whether the Third Secret has been revealed in full or not. The big questions regarding what was released in May 2000. Where in the released version of the Third Secret does it speak of dangers threatening the faith and the great apostasy in the church? Because so many cardinals tell us that the Third Secret relates to that. But when you read what has been released, there's no mention about apostasy or crisis of faith. Sure, there's images that pertain to a great persecution of the church during the 20th century, no doubt. Nor does the released part provide the missing words of Our Lady following the etc. Nor does it provide any explanation of the connection to 1960. There's nothing in the revealed 62-line part that makes us ask the question, why did we have to wait until 1960? Nor is there any explanation as to how the released 62 lines on 4 pages is consistent with the statement of so many that there is a part of the Third Secret contained on 1 page of 25 lines. I can tell you my private opinion about the date 1960. It relates to the Second Vatican Council. In early 1959, John the 23rd announced his intention of a Second Vatican Council. When he read this Third Secret, he said, this does not pertain to my pontificate. I'll leave it to others to interpret, etc. So we're not targeting the Second Vatican Council per se, but perhaps it's an event that is a catalyst for what would follow afterwards, the decades afterwards, the great crisis of faith. Does Fatima belong to the past? Well, I thought it had. After 2000, I thought it's over, closed, etc. Comments of Pope Benedict XVI, 11th of May 2010. Press conference, quote, beyond this great vision of the suffering Pope, I indicated future realities of the Church which are little by little developing and revealing themselves. So on his visit to Fatima in 2010, Benedict's saying it's not over. There's still being more revealed little by little. Comments by Pope Benedict XVI, 13th of May 2010 at Fatima. Quote, whoever thinks that the prophetic message of Fatima is concluded deceives himself. May the 7 years which separate us from the centenary of the Apparitions hasten the fulfillment of the prophecy of the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary to the glory of the Most Holy Trinity. So in 2010, Pope Benedict did not believe that the triumph of the Immaculate Heart had yet occurred. Pope Benedict's wish to consecrate Russia. Pope Benedict sent Archbishop Hilarion Capucci in October 2007 to Patriarch Alexei II of the Russian Orthodox Church to inquire if he would be offended if the Pope performed a consecration of Russia. The Patriarch indicated he and Russia would be offended, and so Pope Benedict dropped any pursuit of such a consecration. Other questions for debate. Did enough people, that is us, the laity, do the first Saturday's devotion? Did the revealed part of the third secret relate to the assassination attempt of John Paul II in 1981? One can argue strongly no. Why? The scene on 13 May 1981 was festive. There was no big city half in ruins. No Pope half trembling, halting with a halting step. No bishops religious climbing a steep mountain to a big cross. No Pope praying for the souls of the corpses on his way. No Pope weeping over the carnage of his brethren before his own demise. No soldiers firing bullets and arrows at him. No dead Pope, no dead bishops, priests, religious or laity. Now, what we see in the revealed 62 lines is imagery. Imagery of the church persecuted throughout the 20th century because Russia hasn't been persecuted. Hasn't been converted. It is the suffering church and the martyrs that arise because of this persecution. And of course, John Paul II's assassination attempt, the assassination attempt on him on 13 May 1981 is part of the persecution of the church and how the Holy Father would have much to suffer. Okay, it's part of it. We don't look at it as some just random event that's irrelevant. I believe it has an important part in the overall picture of Fatima. Other questions for debate. Do you mind getting me some water? Has the West converted and avoided chastisement? No. Only much worse, as we discussed earlier. How do we understand this overall? The West, the Christian world, is apostatizing. It needs to be chastised, to correct it, to come back to God. God makes it clear through Our Lady that the instrument of chastisement on the apostate West will be Russia. This is though a conditional chastisement. It's like in the Old Testament when God sent Jonah, go to Nineveh and preach to them that if they don't convert, they will be destroyed. Nineveh in Assyria. So Jonah goes, he's the prophet, and he goes to Nineveh and he preaches conversion, sackcloth, ashes, and blah, blah, blah. If you don't convert, you'll be destroyed in 40 days. What the Ninevites do, they convert. And therefore they avoid chastisement. They're not destroyed. Jonah gets all upset. He wanted Nineveh destroyed. They're the evil empire. He goes under a tree and he gets all whinging about it, and then God corrects him. They're my children too. To quote Ezekiel, God doesn't wish the death of the evil ones, but that they convert and live. And Nineveh, because of the preaching of Jonah, converted and lived. Now, God is offering a chance to the West to convert and live. What does the West, or the Christian world, have to do to show that it's converted in order to live and avoid chastisement from Russia? Well, ask the whole church to do something, starting with the popes, with the bishops and the laity. Consecrate Russia, the bishops join with him in that, and the laity do the devotion of the first 5 Saturdays. God will accept that as the sign of the conversion of the West, and Russia will be converted to change from being that instrument of chastisement to being the instrument of conversion, of restoration, of Christianity. Not just in Russia, but in the West, in the Middle East, in China, in Asia, in etc., etc. The other questions, has the Immaculate Heart triumphed? Well, I just told you Pope Benedict didn't believe so in 2010, and I don't think it's happening in 2022 either. Is this the era of peace? I don't think so either. I don't need to elaborate on that. What can we all agree on? The West has not converted, only become worse, especially since 1917 and again in 1960 and again blah, blah, right now to this point. You could see it, you could feel it becoming worse and worse during 2020 when you had all those crises in the United States, all those riots, etc. Russia has changed for the better in some ways, but I can't argue there is that full conversion desired by Our Lady of Fatima. We are not living in an era of peace. The church is suffering its greatest and worsening crisis of faith, and apostasy within the church that's tangible. I'll name it. Look at the church in Germany. They are in total revolt. Total revolt. They are not Catholic for the most part anymore. They want the church to swallow completely the sexual revolution. For the church in Germany, there is no more sexual sin. That's why the church in Germany is dying, shrinking by 400,000 a year through a natural attrition because the birth rate is now below the death rate, and people just signing off Catholicism and saying, I'm not being Catholic anymore. It's full of money. They get 6 billion euros a year from the government through the church tax. Full of money, but no faith, or little faith. There are plenty of good Germans still there, but they're in the minority. What also can we agree on? The final battle over the family is currently being waged. The need to still pray and do penance is so essential, and more essential now than ever. The triumph of the Immaculate Heart must still be in the future. Looking at current events, Father Malachi Martin, now I must tell you, a lot of people think he's a joke. They don't take him seriously. But he left the Jesuit order because it was no longer really Catholic. He got dispensed from his priestly vocation, but not dispensed from his vow of celibacy. So for the rest of his life, for decades, he went talking about Fatima, limited by his pontifical secret seal imposed upon him, and he wrote books, very interesting books. He became a world-famous novelist, etc. He was also a famous exorcist, so some of his literature relates to exorcisms from his experiences. Father Malachi said this, on the Art Bell show, one of the interviews in the late 90s. Quote, Russia and Kiev are involved in the final solution of this problem. He said that in the late 90s. I only came across that quote about 3 weeks ago. Actually, before the war started, a little bit more than 3 weeks ago. In the late 90s, what's Kiev? Okay, it's a significant city in Ukraine and Eastern Europe, but it's not a tier 1 city in Europe. It's not a Paris, it's not a Rome, it's not Moscow, it's not London. Okay, it's not Berlin. What's the problem Father Malachi is talking about? Now, this is a man who read the Third Secret twice in full. The problem is that we haven't consecrated Russia. We're not consecrating Russia properly by name. Russia and Kiev are involved in the final solution of this problem. Said in the late 90s, he couldn't elaborate because of papal secrecy. It was vague in the late 90s, but it's clear now. In my opinion, what Father Malachi Martin was referring to is that we needed a trigger to compel the papacy to consecrate Russia by name. We needed a crisis. When everyone's believing the consecration's done and Russia's converted and the full secrets have been revealed and the message is over, we don't need to do anything more. It's in the past. So we needed a crisis to refocus on Fatima and to finally compel the church, the papacy, the Vatican to do what Our Lady asked for 1917, 1929. Now, Father Malachi Martin also said these other things in different interviews about the Third Secret that we can put together in one paragraph. Now, I could tell when you listen to the Malachi Martin interviews with Art Bell, you're listening to a man who wants to tell us the full secret, but he can't. He's constrained. Have you ever been in that situation? I have. You know a secret, you can't say it all, but you give little hints, all right? And sometimes you might overstep the mark a little bit. Malachi Martin said the following in different interviews. A woman from Perth in Australia rang. And she rang from Australia to the United States on this radio program, and she said, I know a priest in Australia, a Jesuit priest. I think I know who that priest is. He's dead now, Father Little. And she said that there's this priest in Australia who says that the third secret mentions a pope who's under the influence of the devil or controlled by the devil. Is that true, Malachi Martin? Malachi Martin says that person has either read the third secret, right, or something similar. And Art Bell goes, oh my. Now, I don't believe there's no pope or any person who's under the control of the devil. But what we might say from that or insinuate from that, from Father Malachi Martin's own words, is that the third secret might relate to a bad pope. That's why Cardinal Giappi would say the third secret pertains to, among other things, the apostasy in the church, which will begin at the top. Who's at the top? Not me, not us, not Father Andrew, though he's at the top in this place, we know that. All right? What else did Father Malachi Martin say? Talked about the crisis of faith. The third secret relates to the crisis of faith. He also spoke about an extraordinary, frightening worldwide event that all will see but interpret differently. They're his own words. A frightening worldwide event that all will see but interpret differently. Like what I told you about the Aurora Borealis of 1938. Hitler saw it, but he didn't interpret it to mean upcoming war, the prophesied war that would be as a chastisement. He interpreted it as God's sign of my desire to take Austria. So is this coming? I'm not saying for sure, I'm just telling you what Father Malachi Martin said. He also said that salvation for the church and the world will come from the east. Made that very clear. When he spoke about Russia and Kiev, in the same interview, salvation will come from the east. Looking at the upcoming consecration by Pope Francis. Now, as we said in the introduction, Pierre said, let's get together, Robert, with a few friends. Let's talk about Fatima. Let's emphasise the need to do devotion to the first 5 Saturdays. And I said, okay, but look, I say a lot of controversial things about Fatima. Not everyone agrees with me. And if what I say gets public, I could be in trouble. So let's just do it in-house secret and invite people, just tap them on the shoulder. But when this announcement was made by Pope Francis, I thought, okay, if he intends to consecrate Russia and Ukraine by name, then all these controversies I've outlined really are mute now. Okay? So I said, let's go public. What was the announcement, the first announcement of Pope Francis? On Friday, 25 March, during the celebration of penance at 1700 in St. Peter's Basilica, I'll consecrate Russia and Ukraine to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Pray together, peace. This surprise announcement follows the Ash Wednesday appeal made by the bishops of Ukraine. Quote, Holy Father, in these hours of immeasurable pain and terrible ordeal for our people, we, the bishops of the Episcopal Conference of Ukraine, our spokesman for the unceasing and heartfelt prayer, supported by our priests and consecrated persons, which comes to us from all Christian people, that your holiness will consecrate our motherland and Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Responding to this prayer, we humbly ask your holiness to publicly perform the act of consecration to the Sacred Immaculate Heart of Mary of Ukraine and Russia, as requested by the Blessed Virgin in Fatima. May the Mother of God, Queen of Peace, accept our prayer. Regina Paces, Ora pro nobis. What Pope Francis originally announced he would do, again at 5 p.m. on 25 March during the celebration of penance in St. Peter's Basilica, consecrate Russia and Ukraine. Now I've been told just this morning that the consecration, the penance service begins at 5 p.m. in Rome, but the consecration prayer will be recited at 6:30 p.m. in Rome, which would mean 4:30 a.m. in Sydney. Now, authorities need to confirm that, but that's what I heard this morning. The same act of consecration on the same day will be carried out in Fatima by His Eminence Cardinal Krajewski, Apostolic Almoner, as envoy of the Holy Father. So it's been linked to Fatima by the Pope through that act, no doubt about it. All the bishops of the world have been invited by Pope Francis to participate in this congregation, together with equivalents and priests. Equivalents might mean abbots, head of religious orders, and priests. Now, Our Lady never asked for the participation of priests, for example. Is that a bad thing? No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's prayer, it's a good thing. So far, the following bishops' conferences have indicated that they will participate in the consecration. These are the ones I'm aware of through just reading articles on the internet. The Bishops' Conference of Latin America, now that's huge. Right from Mexico to the bottom of Argentina and Chile and every country in between. That is huge in number. There's far more bishops in those countries alone than the number of bishops that participated in the 1984 consecration. USA, 80 plus bishops so far have indicated their intention to participate. England, Wales, Ireland, the Philippines, the Caribbean, Ukraine, Spain, the European Community Conference of Bishops, again, huge numbers of bishops. Slovakia, Nicaragua, Kazakhstan, and Australia as well. I know specifically the Sydney Archdiocese made an announcement yesterday. People are concerned about the mentioning of inclusion of Ukraine in the consecration, and people can argue different things here. Well, Ukraine was part of Russia in 1917 and the Soviet Union in 1929, and it's in a diabolical moral situation and caught up, of course, centrally in this current war. I don't see it as a problem to also consecrate another country. The next development. However, on Tuesday the 22nd of March, I heard the following announcement from Pope Francis. Quote, I invite every community and all the faithful to unite with me on Friday, March 25, the solemnity of the Annunciation, to the solemn act of consecration of humanity, especially Russia and Ukraine, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, so that she, the Queen of Peace, may help us obtain peace. If what happens on Saturday morning our time is a recitation of the above, namely the consecration of humanity, especially Russia and Ukraine, then it can be argued by some that Russia is no longer the main object of Pope Francis's consecration, rather humanity as a whole, and Russia and Ukraine secondary level. Rather, the object seems simply to, some could argue that the object would simply be to end the current Ukraine-Russia war. That's an argument. If that's the case, then the upcoming consecration will simply be another pious consecration that will bear some, perhaps significant fruits. Again, ending the current Ukraine-Russia war. We saw, for example, in 1931, 13th of May 1931, the consecration of Portugal by her bishops. This apparently, by all accounts, this consecration wasn't of Russia, but of Portugal. But did it bear fruit? Well, Portugal was spared from the horrors of the Spanish Civil War and entirely spared from the greater horrors of the Second World War. But will a consecration of humanity, especially Russia and Ukraine, be enough to prevent further world catastrophes? Note the following interview with Sister Lucia in 1957 with Father Augustin Fuentes. Sister Lucia, quote, tell them, Father, that the Blessed Virgin said repeatedly to my cousins Francisco and Jacinta, as well as to me, that many nations would disappear from the face of the earth, that Russia would be the instrument of chastisement from heaven for the whole world if the conversion of that poor nation is not obtained beforehand. Then we have the release of the prayer of consecration on the 23rd of March, our time, yesterday, our time. The act of consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, 25 March 2022. I've read the document, the prayer, at least 3 times. It is a long prayer. Mary is invoked under the following titles: Mary, Mother of God, Holy Mother, Immaculate Heart, Star of the Sea, Ark of the New Covenant, Queen of Heaven, restore God's peace to the world. To the world, that's significant. Queen of the Rosary, Queen of the human family, that's novel. Never heard that before. Is it heretical? No, I think Mary is Queen of the human family, humanity, the human race. Queen of Peace. Introductory reference to Russia in the consecration prayer. Quote, the people of Ukraine and Russia who venerate you with great love now turn to you, even as your heart beats with compassion for them and for all those peoples decimated by war, hunger, injustice and poverty. There are many sins Pope Francis does not mention in this prayer. And some people have been highly critical of that. When you read through the list of sins, there's no reference to the sexual revolution and all the sins that flow from that. The divorce, the abortion, the contraception, etc., etc. But is that essential in the consecration prayer? The critical text of the consecration prayer is as follows. Therefore, Mother of God and our Mother, to your immaculate heart we solemnly entrust and consecrate ourselves, the Church and all humanity, especially Russia and Ukraine. Accept this act that we carry out with confidence and love. Grant that war may end and peace spread throughout the world. Then we have a further consecration near the end of the prayer. We trust that through your heart, peace will dawn once more. To you we consecrate the future of the whole human family, the needs and expectations of every people, the anxieties and hopes of the world. The big question now, does the above consecration fulfill Our Lady's requests made in 1917 and 1929? This debate is already raging on the internet and blogs, and people of all different colours on the spectrum. This is my private opinion. Our Lady originally asked for the leadership of the Pope here in making the act of consecration. Is this the case with this consecration? Yes. To consecrate, not just to, for example, what's the other word we have here? Entrust. To consecrate. Do we have the word consecrate here? Yes. To mention Russia by name, not the whole world, not the world, not those countries in most need. To consecrate Russia by name. Do we have it in this consecration prayer? Yes. To the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Yes. In union with the bishops of the world. Yes. All on the same day. Yes. For world peace. Yes. These are the critical elements. So I'm taking a position. The prayer is long. There are many things mentioned there Our Lady never asked for. There's many consecrations there Our Lady doesn't ask for. But does what Our Lady asks for, are these things in this prayer? In my opinion, the answer is yes, 7 times out of 7. Does it matter that priests and the laity are also being asked to recite this consecration prayer? No, it doesn't matter at all. Why would it matter? Prayer is prayer. Prayer is good. The laity have a role here. They've always had a role in the Fatima message. We're meant to do the devotion of the first 5 Saturdays. It is good and a matter of meritorious work on our part to recite this prayer. I'll give you an example by way of analogy. Charlie, my friend here, sorry for embarrassing you. Charlie here, the front. I asked Charlie, pray for me, I'm sick. I'm very sick. I could die soon. So then Charlie says, I'll do that for you, Robert. So Charlie goes away and prays. And the next day I see Charlie. I said, Charlie, did you pray for me? He said, yes, I prayed for you, Robert. I prayed for your recovery. I also prayed for your wife and for your children, for your mother and your brothers. Did he do what I asked? Yes, he did. He prayed for me. The fact that he prayed also for my most important loved ones does not detract from the prayer he offered for me. As if praying for my mother, my wife, my children, my brothers somehow dilutes his prayer for me. It doesn't. These are extra prayers, meritorious prayers. If a great moral majority of the world's bishops participate in the above consecration, then we will have the most precise of all the consecrations to date, vis-a-vis Our Lady's requests. See, we like it to be simple. Let's give us a one-paragraph prayer that says, I, Pope X, consecrate Russia, and I'm not being funny here, I'm just saying it simply, to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. In union with all the bishops of the world. We want it simple like that. But Our Lady never prescribed precisely what the prayer should be. It's left to the church to devise, to write that prayer. So long as what she asks for is in that prayer. I've identified 7 core elements in her original requests, which all these 7 elements have never existed in any of the previous consecrations done so far, together at the same time. I believe, in my opinion, they all exist in this consecration prayer. But we still have some open-ended issues. How many bishops will be involved in this? I think there's thousands so far. You notice there was nothing from Africa in that list, or many of the Asian nations. The bishops of Japan, Korea, India, I didn't read any there yet. Or the Middle East. I know the Maronite Eparchy in Australia is getting involved, but I haven't heard anything yet, but maybe hopefully they are. If all the bishops' conferences, all the bishops of those conferences get on board for this consecration, it will be far more than the number of bishops in the 1984 consecration. I don't know the numbers exactly, there's about 5,500 bishops in the world. When Our Lady says in union with all the bishops of the world, that is a moral all. It's not an absolute all. There might be a bishop who's in prison somewhere, knows nothing about this event. Right? Or a bishop with dementia who's just lost it. Or under sedation in the hospital after an operation. Or a number of bishops who might say, I don't believe in that rubbish, I'm not going to be involved in that. But if you say here's a private opinion, if you say get 4,000 out of 5,500 bishops doing it, I don't think God is necessarily a bean counter like a strict accountant. There's a moral majority there. And have we as the laity done enough for the first 5 Saturdays? I think the devotion to the first 5 Saturdays has always existed in the church continuously since it was first requested. It's a matter of degree, and only God can know and answer that question. What is meant to follow from this consecration if it is accepted as fulfilling Our Lady's requests? And 13th of July 1917, to repeat, in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me. It's an absolute. And she shall be converted. That's an absolute. And a period of peace will be granted to the world. That's an absolute. August 1931, our Lord said they will do it, but it will be late, but not too late. Some people are out there saying too late. No, not too late. It will be late, but not too late. Yes, it will be late, but now it appears that it will hopefully be done. What hopefully will follow if the consecration is done as per Our Lady's request? These are my private opinions. The current scandalous Russia-Ukraine war will be brought to an end. Heaven knows how to do that. We don't. One would reasonably expect that Russia's conversion would in due course follow. How, I don't know. And result in the full communion of the Russian Orthodox Church with the Pope of Rome and the Catholic Church, followed by the other Orthodox churches, ending the great schisms of centuries. A united church once again breathing with two lungs, east and west. Instead of being an instrument of chastisement, Russia will become a great instrument of peace and source of truth and goodness in the world, assisting in the restoration of Christianity. God will use Russia to help convert the rest of the world. The West, the Middle East, China, and the present great crisis in the church will come to an end. As Father Malachi Martin said, salvation will come from the East. However long the period of peace will be for, God will use it to advance the gospel to nations and prepare them for the second coming of Jesus Christ sometime in the future. Again, we don't know how long. In the end, all we can hope to do is remain faithful and work out our salvation and the salvation of those we love in fear and trembling, one day at a time. On that note, I finish. Thank you and God bless.
We'll take a couple of questions. Rob, can I start? Ask me to answer your question. On the first half, and just now you said Russia and the Orthodox Church will convert. Does that mean they'll become Catholic? Or can you explain?
Okay. I'll put it in terms which I think has a level of gentleness and appropriateness and respect. There are many Orthodox who have practiced their faith a lot better than Catholics practice ours. We cannot have this binary mindset, Catholics are good, Orthodox are bad. That's nonsense. I put it in these terms, a reunited church in full communion under the original Petrine office that the East were under for the first millennium and accepted at the Council of Florence again in the 15th century before the schism opened up again. It will be, the Orthodox churches will be sister churches like the Eastern Catholic churches are. They'll maintain their beautiful liturgy, their customs, their culture, their language, their liturgical cycles, whatever. They won't become Roman Catholics. We become one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church under the primacy of the Bishop of Rome as it was meant from the beginning. That's how I put it. Okay?
I'll just give you the mic so everybody can hear.
Thanks, Robert. In your opinion, why do you think successive popes, particularly in the 20th century, failed to exclusively consecrate Russia?
Multiple answers. In my readings, these books, Pius XI himself said if the Mother of God has something important to say, don't you think she should say to the Vicar of Christ? If that quote is true, then it indicates to me that somehow deep down he really didn't give full 100% credence to these apparitions in 1929, 30, 31. Remember, our Lord said, my ministers are tardy here. They're not doing what I asked. I'll suffer the consequences. Why John the 23rd never did it? Well, Pius XII was known as the Fatima Pope. He tried to do something. Why he didn't go all the way, I have no answer for that. Consecrations of 1942, 52, he certainly was aware of the Fatima message, consecrated the world to the Immaculate Heart of Mary and the peoples of Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, but did not involve the bishops of the world. Only God knows. I don't know why he hesitated. John the 23rd, we can say he hesitated because he he tended to think the way forward for the church was his plans for the Second Vatican Council, and he opposed prophets of doom. He said that in his opening speech at the Second Vatican Council. I can't give a reason for Paul VI. I think John Paul II really wanted to consecrate Russia. Pressure was put upon him. Recent readings say that many of the international diplomats put pressure on him not to mention Russia, because it's all about the geopolitics of that time, the Cold War, the consequences of mentioning Russia, what that might do to Christians behind the Iron Curtain, etc., etc. I believe he was good-spirited and he wanted to mention it, but the pressure was very strong on him, even other cardinals as well. I do personally believe, without any evidence, that there are forces in the church that have been determined for decades to make sure it never happened. Did not want it to happen and would frustrate it at all costs. If the infiltration of the church by communists from 1929 onwards, a deliberate plan and strategy of Stalin, is true, and I believe it to be true, then one of their chief objectives would be to prevent Fatima from attaining its purpose. That's all I can say. One of the first books I read when I began to take my faith seriously from 1986 onwards was a book called AA 1025, Anti-Apostle 1025. It's the memoirs of one of the infiltrators that Stalin sent into the church. Okay? And I think that has a role in it somewhere as well, without a doubt. That's all I can say to that question. Thank you for that question.
We'll just take that 2 or 3 more
Yeah,
questions. It's hitting 10 o'clock.
Yeah, we've hit 10 o'clock.
Hey Rob, just knowingly, obviously the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church prior to the schism was a universal church, an apostolic faith, or one apostolic church. And in saying, hopefully, how when we believe the consecration goes ahead, in accordance to God's will, God willing, there's a possibility and a high possibility or chance that the Catholic Church and Orthodox Church reunites as that reunited church that we've just mentioned, God willing. In saying all that, do you think that the Orthodox bishops should be part of this consecration as well?
It's a good question. I've heard it, but I don't think any commentator on Fatima has ever made the point that it is an absolute necessity. I don't think it's implied in Our Lady's request. The implication I get from Our Lady's request is that the Pope has to do it in union with the bishops that are in union with him. Okay? Also, I must make it very clear, don't expect fireworks as of Sunday. Okay? Don't expect instant results. Remember, the results that flowed from the 42 consecration panned out over 2.5 years. The results that flowed from the 82, 83, 84 consecration took another 7 or 8 years to fully flow through. All right? And again, I'm speaking as an opinion, and I'm sure there'll be some commentators who will push back and say this consecration prayer failed again like all the others. And so there's still going to be that debate out there. I'm just saying, here are the 7 core points, what Our Lady asked for. My personal opinion, I believe they are all found and met in this consecration prayer to be said on Saturday. I will give my opinion. I think I will attend St. Jerome's Punch Bowl. Sorry, Father, St. Jerome's Punch Bowl at 3 a.m. To be part of this event. And I urge you all likewise to be either here at this parish or the St. Mary's Cathedral with the Archbishop, etc., to be part of this momentous event. The most number of Catholics ever gathered together to offer prayer for one single intention in the history of the Church.
2 more questions. Charlie.
I had 2 questions to answer. Robert, I was going to ask you about how quick do you think this will be after the consecration?
Yeah.
Overnight, or is it over a 20-year period? The other question I was going to ask you is, we're looking for the Pope to consecrate Russia and the bishops. How important is it for us to be part of this, as in praying for this to happen leading up to Saturday, to participate on Saturday morning, and moving forward? How important?
I think it's important. I think it has value the prayers of millions of ordinary Catholics, baptized believers, added to the consecration prayer of the Pope and the bishops of the world has meritorious value. I should also mention, I forgot to mention, that Pope Emeritus Benedict will be doing this as well. Because there are people called benevacantists. There are people out there who believe that Pope Francis is not a true Pope. Benedict is still the true Pope. And so I'm glad Pope Emeritus Benedict is part of this event to block that argument, okay? He is there, he is saying it. Another favourite of, good old, traditional Catholics, Bishop Schneider of Kazakhstan is also doing it. Cardinal Burke of America is also doing it, okay? So let's do it, okay?
One more, Rob.
Okay.
There are two quick parts to my question. Did you say that the consecration will come from the east finally?
No, the salvation will come from the east. I'm quoting Father Malachi Martin. Salvation will come from the east. That means, salvation comes from God through Jesus Christ. But this new period of revival and restoration will come from the east. God, through Christ, through Our Lady's Immaculate Heart, her prayers wins these graces to restore Russia to become that great instrument of, future restoration of Christianity. Okay?
So the second part of my question, what happens if Russia unites with the east, and how likely is that?
Unites with the east. What do you mean by the east?
What happens if Russia decides to unite with the east?
You mean with China? Russia is the east here in this context.
The Eastern Church.
Well, the Russian Orthodox Church is the preeminent Eastern Orthodox Church, by far the largest. Okay? I believe if the Russian Orthodox say they want to be now in full communion with the Catholic Church and the Catholic faith, the other Orthodox churches will follow. That's my opinion.
Like Syria and Iraq.
Well, you've got different Orthodox churches. The Syrian Orthodox are non-Chalcedonian. They're different than the mainstream Orthodox churches. They don't accept the Council of Chalcedon's definition of AD 451. There are problems still to be solved, but if the momentum builds and these wonderful things are happening, people will be watching and saying, they need to ask questions. What's happening? Why? Should we be part of this? Okay. People are free to go home.
Thanks, Robert. Just a quick two-part question. The first one, as far as you know, all the Australian bishops involved in this consecration coming up. And the second question, so you mentioned in the first part of your talk, you mentioned a list of bad things that resulted in our failure to consecrate Russia as requested. But to what extent are those things that you listed just a result of us as a fallen, this broken society, as a human nature that's fallen?
Okay. Firstly, the answer to your first question, I've read somewhere that the bishops of Australia are on board. I haven't heard anything official. Father Andrew might know something official there. I do know our Archbishop here in Sydney is fully on board, which is wonderful. Now, of course, about all those terrible things that have happened, of course, these are human calamities. They're a result of human sin. But they would not have occurred, at least not in the number and the extent that they have occurred, if we obeyed Our Lady's peace plan of 1917-29. God would have arranged things in a way so that the world would not have collapsed so precipitously in the way it did. And God works in a very subtle way. I remember watching a documentary about World War II and about the African War and why the British kept losing, as if Rommel knew what the British plans were, is because the Italians had stolen the British codes from the British embassy in Rome and given them to the Germans. So every time this American colonel in the British army is reporting back to his officers in the United States, the Germans were intercepting those communications, so they knew in advance the British moves, and Rommel would easily counter them. Now then, Churchill gets the thought, the Germans know our codes. So before the Battle of Alamein, he orders a change of all the security, all the communication codes of the British. So when the battle breaks out, the Germans intercepting the codes don't understand the codes. So Rommel is at a disadvantage. What happens? The British win at Alamein, and the war in Africa is turned permanently. Who gave Churchill that thought that just came to his mind? His guardian angel, God gave him that thought, that change. That's how God helped shorten the war. All right?
Thank you. Wow, what a talk, eh?